What was the worst mistake you ever made? Got stuck on my balcony before work, one morning. Door latched, as I shut it. Was approximately 6 feet off ground, so I decided to jump off. Landed on my feet. Grass was wet, feet slipped. Fractured 3 vertebrae, spent 9 months in a hospital bed. Holy shit. How are you, now? I'm great, actually. I had some problems with muscle atrophy, once I was able to be mobile. So, I bought a gym membership and got to work. Once I got muscle mass back, I was completely fine. Full range of motion, everything. Spine specialist, who I met with, at the end of all this, told me that I pretty much stuck the landing, as I shot all the bone fragments into my abdomen, and not through my spinal cord. This was 16 years ago. Occasionally, once or twice a year, I get a sore back, for a day or two. Talking to police, without a lawyer. Don't do that, kids. I took a legal class, where they told us about a hairdresser who was being stalked by her ex. When she left work, after dark, she slipped a pair of shearing scissors in her coat pocket, just in case, because her ex had ambushed her in the parking lot of her apartment complex before. On the way home, she was pulled over. The officer noticed the handle of the scissors poking out, and asked what they were. She explained they were precautionary, in case her ex attacked her again. She was arrested for having a concealed weapon she failed to notify the officer about. Because she intended to use the scissors as a weapon, legally, they were a weapon. If she had just said, the scissors were from work, and she accidentally left them in her pocket, they wouldn't have been considered a weapon, and she would have been fine. There was a case, where a woman went to pick her 14-year-old son up, from school, and was greeted by a police officer, who told her there had been some vandalism, and they were questioning a couple of kids who may have seen something. He asked if it would be okay to question her son, and she okayed it. Several minutes later, she saw her son's teacher, and asked where the vandalism was. The teacher said he didn't know about any vandalism. She found out a girl was accusing her son of rape, and the police were questioning him about it. Dorky guy, in our graphics lab at school, was trying to convince us to buy Apple stock, as we struggled with our POS Power PC 6300s. No man. They're rehiring the CEO they fired. He started the company, he's like, visionary. He's gonna resurrect them. Right. My husband is forever pissed at his mom, for not getting him stock in Google, on his 13th birthday, like he asked for. Apparently her response was, the internet is just a fad. So, she bought him a skateboard or something. My dad still talks about how his friends tried to convince him to invest in some expensive coffee shop. My dad said it was dumb, since no one wanted a $3 cup of coffee they could make at home. It was Starbucks, in the early 90s. I skipped a class for organic chemistry in college, before finals. Didn't get the memo that final exams would be given in a different room. Showed up 45 minutes late, and my professor wouldn't let me in. I failed the class, and nearly failed out of college that semester. I was on academic probation after that. Bring on a sleazy business partner, whose shenanigans put me under. Even 25 years later, if he stepped in front of my car, I wouldn't even think of tapping the brakes. Dealing with this now, it's brutal. He's embezzled almost $1 million. I feel you. That's even worse than my story. Mine didn't do that. He just started a side business without telling me, until it was too late. He'd already signed the lease, and was on the hook for hundreds of thousands. I pointed out that, because we were a subchapter S, his credit affected the credit of the company. The guy's antique dealership closed a year later. When I asked if he had resolved his credit issues, he said, all cleared up. And I was a big enough idiot to believe him. What he didn't tell me is that he had declared bankruptcy, and was interviewing for a job out of town. He literally got up in the middle of our second largest client's strategic planning meeting, and never came back. 3 months later, when I'm about to tap into what had been my pristine credit to buy out his stock, I was told by the bank that we had filed for bankruptcy. After all, if one shareholder files, then the company is bankrupt. News to me. As a result, I couldn't borrow a dime. He never told me a thing about it. Because my company's credit was now effed up beyond recognition, it absolutely destroyed my vendor relationships. I couldn't do anything. I had to fold and file bankruptcy myself. This with a business that I had spent 8 years building into $5 million in annual sales. Poof. Gone. Mind you, I made big mistakes in how I handled it. The minute I found out he had opened a side business, I should have given him the option of shutting down that side gig, or forfeiting his shares of stock. But I was kind of naive and trusting. Not watching a movie with my dad, before he died from cancer. My dad was months into his chemo treatments at this point, and he just asked me one day if I wanted to watch some old movies with him for a bit. I declined, and said I needed to work on school stuff. I was living at home at the time, and I was taking about 15 hours of classes, so I was generally busy, but not then. It tore me apart to see my dad that way. The drugs had been rough on him, and it pained me to see him like that. My dad passed maybe a month or two later, and it is still to this day my biggest regret. We both loved movies, and I would give anything to go back and watch anything with him. I still randomly have moments of despair thinking about it, and I know he would not want me to continue beating myself up, but it's hard. Don't have regrets like me. Spend those precious moments with your loved ones. I'm a dad. Trust me, he didn't mind. Probably was proud to see you working hard, and getting work done. I know I would be. I also know, you dad would not want you holding on to that regret. The beautiful thing about having loving parents is, that they generally understand, that their kids might be too busy for something. I know it probably doesn't make it any easier to cope with, but in similar instances, I've reminded myself, that I was doing the best I could at the time. I don't know him and I don't know you, but your dad probably understood, that you were swamped with work and I'd bet he'd want to see you succeed more than anything. However, I can guarantee, he was just as grateful for all the other times you were able to spend together. Quitting college, to take a management promotion, at my fast food job. I almost did this. Was working fast food, as a shift manager, and going to a nearby community college in the early 2000s. Our store manager had just quit, and they were looking to replace them. There were two options. One guy, who was already the assistant manager, and wanted to make me his assistant when he was store manager. This meant, a salary job, making about $45,000 to $55,000 a year, again, early 2000s. The other, was a guy from another store, who wanted to bring in his own people. They ended up bringing in the guy from the other store. That guy proceeded to fire every single shift manager, except one, and bring in all his friends to work the restaurant. Myself included, I ended up fired. I can say this with hindsight, one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. It motivated me to get off my ass and go away to college, get the campus experience, where I met my now wife. Fun postscript, the one manager they kept, was a buddy of mine who we always jokingly called him McClifer. He still works for the company, just at a different store. When I went home for a holiday break, around 2010 or so, I saw the manager that fired me, and he was stocking shelves at the local Walmart. That's what prompted me to contact my old buddy, and ask if he knew anything, and he laid out the story for me. The guy that fired me and brought in his friends ended up being fired himself, when he was caught stealing cash at the end of the night. He, and his friends, would underring customers, miscount drawers, and blame others for the error. This is how he got 3 people fired, and just generally do their best to rob the place blind. Apparently, this lasted for 3 years. Eventually he got caught, when they installed new security cameras. Apparently, the store constantly having miscounted drawers, caused corporate to install cameras on every single register in the manager's desk. Store manager somehow didn't know they actively recorded, and kept the footage for 48 hours. He thought they could only see live shots. He was apparently telling his friends, that they could still do what they did, because corporate wasn't going to pay someone to watch the cameras, all day, every day. When a drawer was short $150, he of course blamed the cashier he wanted to fire. Corporate came in, and said, they'd review the footage. According to my buddy, the manager turned white and realized he was effed. Corporate reviewed the footage and saw him remove the cash himself. He was shit-canned immediately, and a bunch of his friends quit with him, in solidarity, saying, he was framed. It was only $150 they could prove, so, he wasn't prosecuted for it. Got offered an internal promotion, for double salary job, as a JavaScript developer. I was PHP mainly at time, at UK FTSE 100 company, and declined, because I was humble about my skills, and didn't want to cause issues. Now I'm 8 years wiser, and realize, no one knows what they're doing, and I would have been fine with 20 hours on Udemy. My dude. You avoided JavaScript. You have absolutely no idea, how lucky that decision was. I let go someone who was really good for me, because of chronic depression and insecurities, and now here I am, alone, because of it. I know that feel. She was the kindest, smartest, and most motivated woman I've ever known. We dated when she moved to town for a summer internship, before her senior year of college. We started out, telling each other, we were just hanging out, nothing serious, since she was going to be moving to another state after graduation. We had a great summer, and I ended up visiting her at school a few times in the fall. When the time came for her to move, is when we realized we'd both caught feelings for each other, and confessed our love. She asked me to move with her, and I said, I couldn't move that far away from my friends and family, but the truth was, I was afraid I'd hold her back from reaching her potential, and was afraid my anxiety and depression would end up destroying our relationship. That was 20-ish years ago, and I've regretted that decision ever since. I've yet to find a partner that has made me feel as cared for and loved as she did. Sold 83 bitcoins in 2013. I bought Bitcoin to shut my roommate up back in 2010 or so, when it was RuneScape currency. Here's $100, show me what to do, so you'll shut up and leave me alone. I threw that laptop away about a year later, not caring about whatever that nerd coin was she told me about. FML. I may have been using Bitcoin to buy coke on the darknet when Bitcoin was $500 to $1,200. If I kept all of Bitcoin that I may have spent, I'd have over $1 million. I will say that some of that theoretical coke was theoretically fantastic. Theoretically speaking, I killed 38 chickens by pure mistake. I was 10 and wanted to let my parents know how many chickens we had. So, I started placing them in a barrel as I counted them. At some point, I noticed it was way quieter, and dumped the barrel over to see what was going on. I didn't understand at the time that stacking things in an enclosed space creates a breathing issue. So, now we had all these dead chickens, including our beloved birdzilla, intersex, I believe. After attempting chicken CPR, which obviously didn't work, I came into my house bawling that I was a chicken murderer and needed to go to jail. Once my parents fully understood what was going on, they laughed so damn hard and said, my punishment was to bury the chickens, and I was punishing myself hard enough, and my dad explained how oxygen worked. Talked a little about this in other posts, but my decision to stay and try to help my mom. After my grandmother died, my cousin and I were set to inherit a house, but we gave our halves to her. At the time I was living in Europe, in Budapest, for 3.5 years. I was so close to residency. Then I saw she was having trouble financially when I came to visit for a family reunion. I had a return ticket, my jobs, but I effing stayed because I felt bad. We set agreements that I would pay half of everything, and then later give her a bit extra, so I can save to help my fiancé come here. That in order for this to work, I'd like to live in a house, so I'm not paying rent somewhere plus half of the bills, and I wanted to be around the dogs, which I also take care of. Then she took advantage of this by buying more things and investing in the house, which she agreed to sell because she can't afford it without someone helping her. Immediately after I didn't have a way back, things changed. She hated my now ex-partner and would demand time and time again we break up, even though she was nothing but kind to her. She decided she wanted more money immediately. She has threatened to kill herself by putting a gun to her head, pushed me, hit me, tried to choke me, because she would start conflicts and not let me walk away, or didn't like what I had to say. She's tried to cut me off from other parts of the family that know and want to help me. I lost everything because of this decision, but I'm slowly rebuilding, and I think next year I'll be able to find my way back, maybe to Prague this time, or back to Budapest. I don't know, I just want the life I had back, and this time, she won't get to be a part of it. Toss up here. Either the first drink I ever took in secret, or the drink I took this morning in secret. Hard to decide. Hey there friend, it's going to be okay. Those drinks have been drunk, but the next ones haven't been yet. You're still alive and breathing. It is not too late to make different choices for your future self. I'm saying this from deeply personal experience. You can do this. I lean on r/stop drinking daily for motivation, accountability, and inspiration. The mantra from that sub is simple: I will not drink with you today. Every day, you're making a commitment to yourself that just for today, you're not going to drink. When I was still drinking, the thought of never drinking again was too much to imagine. I buried myself in the overwhelming nature of my alcohol abuse, and I literally could not believe that I would be strong enough to permanently change. Moderation was a myth I told myself I was capable of, but every single attempt ultimately led to lower lows. Everyone takes a different path to becoming alcohol-free. There's no wrong way to do it, as long as the end result is a sober you. There are so many tools and programs, but that path doesn't work for everyone. Keep trying till you find what fits. Lastly, show yourself some forgiveness. You made the choices you made, and nothing will ever change that. But alcohol is addictive, there is a genetic component to addiction, and society has inextricably integrated drinking into social behavior. You're surrounded by triggers and temptations. Alcohol has likely loosened the discipline and inhibitions that might otherwise have kept you from doing things you now regret. But you are a human, capable of change, worthy of love and forgiveness. Show yourself some grace, and then get busy investing in the life you want future you to have. When I was 14, maybe, I went to use the bathroom like any normal time. I pissed, wiped, flushed, washed my hands, and walked back to my room. Now, this toilet has a habit of making that noise toilets make after you flush, but for about 2 minutes longer than normal. Nothing ever happened, till that night, when my brother came running into my room, telling me the whole living room and hallways was flooding, and the toilet is overflowing, and won't stop running. I walked out my room to see my mom freaking out. Now for some context, my family is lower class middle class. My parents worked, and they own the home, so we were lucky to have a roof to live under, but we never had extra money to go out to eat, or go to movies, or even vacations. We always ate very basic and easy meals, so my parents could afford the home and bills. I never even left my home state, till I was 16, almost 17. My father also has a massive spending problem, which leaves money very tight for my family. This was almost 9 years ago, mind you. Seeing the way my mom was reacting, seeing her crying, and on her knees, and begging for life, to just stop being shitty for her, left a permanent image in my head. The only other time I've seen my mom cry like this, was Christmas time, December 23, 2023, and that was being my dad left a suicide note, and took off, and we thought he killed himself for hours. My mother was broken, and that moment will forever haunt me. He's still alive, found him in time. Now, the whole house was soaked and flooding, and my mom was freaking, trying to turn the water off, and get the shop vac to suck up the water, and crying, and saying how she doesn't know where she's going to get the money to fix this, and trying to figure out what bill she can push to pay for this. Yeah, I never told her, or fessed up to it. They think it was older brother, and I let them think it. It still haunts me, and makes me want to cry, thinking of her reaction to it. When I was a kid, we used to ride our bikes to the top of a hill, and pedal as fast as we could, down to the beginning of a sidewalk that was pushed up by tree roots, and we would hit super sick jumps off them. No helmet. My bike's front wheel and handlebars became loose from the abuse, and when I landed, my handles were straight, but the wheel sent me right into a tree. Went over the handlebars, head first, and hit the tree. Knocked out cold. From what people tell me, my personality changed, as did my penmanship, grades, and everything. Took an antibiotic for a possible infection I never had to begin with, that the doctor gave me. Didn't realize the medication was banned in certain countries, and has a black box warning. Doc called a week later, after I had taken it for 6 days, and says, I actually didn't have an infection. Antibiotics were never necessary. I now am disabled, and have full body small fiber neuropathy from it, among other things, at 25 years old. It affects my vision, bladder, muscles, walking, etc., nerve damage all over. Had this for 2 years now. Life is a struggle, unfortunately. Spending 11 years in retail seemed like a great idea at the time, better and less toxic than my previous seasonal job. I was dumb, and believed that giving it my all, and being devoted to the company, would take me places. Got passed over for numerous promotions, got screwed over by friends, who didn't care who they had to step on, to get themselves ahead, and ended up getting fired, on a technicality, over a decade in, because a co-worker was gunning for my job. In retrospect, it was the best thing that ever happened to me work-wise. I had been stuck in a rut, and my self-esteem had been so beat down, I was convinced I didn't deserve better. Thank goodness, I ended up in a job I love, with great people. I just regret the time wasted. I made many mistakes growing up, but here's one that stands out the most. In early high school, I hurt people emotionally, through targeted bullying and social exclusion. I was picked on for many years prior to this, so it was mostly redirected anger. I hated the world, and most of the people around me. However, this changed during the later years of high school, and I started accepting people, and vice versa. I'm not sure how this came about. I'm in my 30s now, and a completely different person. I get emotional, thinking of all the times I've made people's lives hell, for no reason, and it's hard to forgive myself for it. If you are going, or went through a tough time in school, as a result of bullying, I'd like to apologize on behalf of the bullies. Most of them will certainly regret it at some point. I was bullied in school. I remember one time sitting outside class on the stairs, and just crying my eyes out, cause I didn't want to go back and get mocked again, and my mother had to pull me out. I switched schools, and was okay after. It has left me with some trust issues, I will admit, but if it helps, I have also forgiven those kids, and don't really think about them, except once in a blue moon, and in a, oh well, guess that happened, type of way. It's good that you're sorry, and please do forgive yourself. Already too much hate and sadness in the world. Wish you all the best going forward. Deciding to have an abortion for the wrong reasons. I do not regret the abortion, but I hold a lot of resentment about how it happened. I panicked as a teenager, rushed my ex through it, didn't even give him a chance to talk to me, because I was so horrified at being talked about within my family, and my relatives judging me, and being the first to not only have a child outside of marriage, but teen pregnancy, was unfathomable to me. I'm 28 now, and the relatives are not a factor in my life, and I'm very bitter about how I rushed myself and my ex, and basically trauma blocked it out my head, because of the opinion of those who didn't matter. The only opinions that mattered were mine and my partner's, and I didn't think about either. My ex suffered a lot with him mental health afterwards, not because he wanted to keep the baby, but how rushed, manic, and honestly, just selfish I was, during it. Was teaching undergraduate students, and a now ex-friend, asked me to offer my students summer work producing this new thing, called NFTs. I wasn't too familiar with what they were back then. This was about 5 years ago, and from what I read, it sounded like a kind of dumb concept, but easy summer work and cash for my students, so I pitched it to them. It turned out that the guy running the company was a notorious scammer, who had already spent time in jail, and I had just exposed my students to his latest bullshit. I'm not the kind to overreact normally, but I was extremely proud of that job, and the reputation that came with it. I thought it was the end of my career, and any chance of ever being trusted by students again. So, I panicked, tried, and thankfully failed, to kill myself, and subsequently fell into a severe alcohol abuse problem, and had to resign. I was extremely fortunate in that my bosses and team were mega supportive of me, and looked out for me every step of the way. I couldn't have asked for more help than they gave me. It wasn't the end of my career at all, but I couldn't face teaching anymore after that. I'm now long-term sober and still work in academia, and I am so grateful to be back on my feet, and didn't throw it all away over a momentary crisis. I tried to prank my school by placing milk in the ceiling of each room. Well, I got most of them, but I made one mistake. Our school already had leaking issues, due to an excess amount of snow that would occur every year. It was the Midwest, so, I think, you get the idea. The many janitors would occasionally check spots where mold was spotted, or it had the occasional leak. It so happens that the milk carton had somehow broke from the milk expanding with how hot it was up there. This I learned in science class, and that would explain things later. Some janitors either had rotten milk spilt all over them, or it made a huge mess on the floor. I was really trying to just make a bad smell that worked, but it also resulted in either exploding milk, or just spilt milk. I was never caught, but I felt guilty,